8:16. I was home alone when the blackout hit my house. I was sitting on my back patio reading a book when I heard the air unit to my left slowly power down until it ticked to a complete stop. The lights in the house abruptly shut off. The emergency storm radio turned on with a fuzzy warning, and the wind began to pick up. This was Friday evening, August 15th. I went inside, one of my first thoughts being to call my parents and see how the blackout was affecting them. After 3 dials, all going to voicemail, I didn't get a response. Next, I tried to call my friend Lori. Same with him, as with my parents. 3 times, no response. As the AC was broken, I found my way around the house, opening windows for a cross breeze, dialing back and forth again between the numbers. After a hot minute, I found time to sit down. I stopped and looked hard at my screen. The storm approaching had clearly taken out a tower because I didn't have reception. Something I found more frightening, this was a storm bad enough to do so. At this point, I tried listening to the weather radio. I could only make out what might have been a handful of hollow, strained words in the static. I stepped out front, holding the radio up for a signal, watching the sky. It was odd. The clouds were a heavy, dark, deep blue-gray you might see before a tornado. The wind was awful, but there was no lightning, thunder, or heavy rain. Only the occasional sprinkle of what I thought would have been the beginning of a rainstorm. Something I failed to realize at the time was a lack of any kind of life on my street. No cars going down the road, no people outside their homes, no suburban noise, all things that would have been discouraged by an oncoming storm anyways. Without luck focusing the radio, I went back inside and continued reading, the radio sitting on the coffee table. It wasn't all that much of an outstanding day. I ate some dry food from the pantry, brushed my teeth, and went to bed. I wouldn't have been writing this if my parents had been home by this morning, if my streets weren't still deserted, if the storm hadn't been in the exact same state it was in yesterday evening, and if something strange didn't happen this evening. I constantly checked my phone for reception. Even then, there's no use to outgoing calls or wasting battery, so I made other use of my time. I walked to Lori's house today. The wind was stronger than it was yesterday, but other than that, the neighborhood was unusually quiet. The Boston Terrier I usually pass on the way to his house didn't bark. I didn't even see it. I knocked on Lori's door in increments, waited a total of 20-ish minutes for some kind of response. Cars were in the driveway. I walked away with nothing. Otherwise, I read most of the day, opting to stay inside the candlelight. Twigs were falling and leaves were finding themselves in places where they shouldn't have been. Today I didn't see anything, a single person, animal, or car. I went to settle down for the night, took a really cold shower, and changed up. I'm typing from my laptop now, brightness down, use limited. I'm typing because of this. My family and Lori's have a shared set of long-distance walkie-talkies we're supposed to use in the case of an emergency. In short, our families are really close, and have been since Lori and I became friends. As I went to lay down and read for the night, I heard something cracky go off outside of my room. I thought it was the weather radio at first, but I have that sitting on my nightstand next to my bed. I got to the hallway, waited, and heard the noise coming from the pantry. I went in and nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard said noise repeat from a shelf above my head. I reached into our emergency basket, shifted around blindly between heat blankets and first aid kits. Honestly, its existence had completely slipped my memory. As I got hold of the walkie-talkie, one word crackled out, in Lori's voice, almost sick-sounding.
Sammy.
I spent a good 10 minutes trying to get a response from his end, to nothing. I'm confused. He must be home now if he's talking to the walkie-talkie, but earlier he didn't answer his door. I'm going to spend more time trying to reach him. I write an update in the morning. 8:17. Today I panicked. I went up and down the neighborhood knocking on doors, looking in windows. Nobody is here. For the houses without garage space, there are cars in the driveways. For the houses with garage space, there are cars in the garages. Nobody should have left. I'm starting to wonder if I missed a tornado siren or some kind of evacuation notice. Even if I did, this was entirely abrupt. My parents haven't come home yet. I thought they were out for a Friday dinner, and that was it. I tried the crappy little payphone down near the neighborhood offices. It took a minute to get there. I was going to drive up in my car, but when I tried to start it, Something loud popped under the hood, followed by smoke venting out from underneath. I propped the hood up after manually opening the garage door for airflow. My battery was completely fried. It was cracked, leaking acid and lightly smoking, a smell that made my lungs burn. So I walked. The offices were locked, the front road was deserted, the payphone didn't work, the shingles on the houses in the front half of the neighborhood had seen some damage. I waited about an hour looking for any cars to pull in. Nothing. By the time I walked back from the office, I tried to stop and appreciate whatever this was. In that moment, I was in solitude. The storm, while scary, was beautiful in a strange sort of way. Dark clouds, strong winds, no rain. It didn't occur to me, as it does now, that the storm had been stationary for almost 3 days. The clouds were swirling rather than traveling. I'm certain I'm in danger, but I haven't had any successful contact since the power went out. Maybe someone will find this laptop in tornado rubble after everything blows over. To complete my update from yesterday, I haven't had any luck getting in touch with Lori. The reception is still down. I knocked on his door again before I settled for the night, and I didn't get a response. The water pressure was weaker than I thought, the water even colder. Did I mention the bathroom's dark? Both my phone and laptop batteries are holding up just fine. They've been going down a lot slower than usual, which makes me wonder if my UI is messed up. I'll have to take them to get looked at sometime. Now, I don't entirely know why I'm writing this. Maybe it'll be a funny story to share with my family, kids, and grandkids someday, the time Sammy missed a major storm evacuation. I'll write an update in the morning. 8:18. Knocked on Lori's door earlier this afternoon. No answer. I'll timestamp things, but my watch has stopped, as well as the other clocks in the house. My phone and laptop clocks are being just as weird. No cues from the walkie-talkie. I did another round of door-to-door checks, and I still didn't see anybody. After giving the car another try, I forgot the battery was busted. I sat out on the front porch to watch for drivers. I finished my book while waiting. Nothing happened all day. I think I'm going to go nuts. I might try and venture outside the neighborhood sometime to see if anybody is sheltering in place. 8:19. Today, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through the craft bin in the pantry, found some paint, popsicle sticks, and dehydrated Play-Doh. The craft glue was expired, so I got some furniture glue from the junk drawer and got to messing around, after laying out a placemat, of course. I made a man out of the popsicle sticks. He turned out a lot taller than I had anticipated, a lot more realistic as well. I made his face out of the bits of Play-Doh that weren't completely dried up, and added details and marker over the dough and wood. He looks perpetually concerned for some reason. I told the walkie-talkie about this, hoping Lori might hear and remember some of the arts and crafts we used to do when we were younger, even if he can't talk back to me from where he is now. I named my new friend Bob the concerned-looking stick man. He's got a little personality. For some reason, I can see him being a cowboy. I might make a rancher's hat for him sometime. I saw my first fallen tree today. It was in the hills, an old oak. I've always had a view of it from my bedroom window, as long as I can remember. I woke up this morning thinking the horizon looked a little bare, the sky a little darker than yesterday. I've only visited that tree once, when I was about 8. I tried climbing it, but ended up falling and breaking my nose. Maybe the city will sit it back up. I remember my 5th grade teacher saying it had been in the hills for at least 150 years. I'm going to try the walkie-talkie for the rest of the night. 8:20. I think the storm is just grazing the city, moving very slowly. The presence was still enough of a need for an evacuation, I guess. I think I might have napped on Friday, between when I started reading and when the blackout happened. I don't entirely remember. If this is the case, I'm extremely upset that my parents left me. Then again, it's very possible that the evacuation was heavily enforced. I also thought I would have heard of such a major storm forming or heading our direction. I'm trying not to dwell on this too much. I left the neighborhood today. Bob watched from the front door. I walked up to and out the front entrance and went to the nearest gas station. It was empty, the doors were open, and the inside smelled rank. Boiling fridge foods and rotting hot dogs on the heated turners. Some looked purple, were likely the cause. I grabbed some dry food and left. Most other buildings were unlocked. Banks, restaurants, little markets, and smoke shops. I didn't see a single person. 8:21. Today I sat around and ate. My laptop battery is still draining slowly. It's at an oddly full 90%. Besides that, pork rinds and roasted peanuts have become a pastime. I tried to set up a lawn chair out in the front yard. It blew over the first time, but I eventually got it right. It reminded me of Snoopy fighting the beach chair in the Peanuts Thanksgiving special. I sat, ate, and watched for cars. I lost my first pork rinds bag to the wind. I held the others down with the right leg of my chair. I thought about taking Bob outside, but chances were he'd probably break from the wind somehow. Instead, I set him up at the window to watch me. I didn't want him to feel left out. I'm going to make it a priority to go to the gas station every once in a while to get food until the storm passes over. In the meantime, I'll also be looking for an outgoing radio, weather, police, anything. Maybe I'll get some help that way. 6 days, going strong. 8:22. Storm looks calmer today. The water pressure is even weaker, and the house is getting colder. Other than that, nothing new. 8:23. I talked to Lori today. The walkie-talkie went off in the bedroom when I was alone in the kitchen, eating. We had a good connection. We asked each other how we were doing, what we'd been up to since we last talked, and finally how we could meet up. Lori told me he was at his house, and I told him I was at mine. I got up and walked over. Having slipped my mind up until that point, I asked him where he had been and why he had come back during such a terrible storm, assuming he had returned after some time of being away. Lori said he'd been at his house since the blackout. I asked him if he had seen me walking by or heard me knocking on his door any of the past few days. He said he didn't, and for that matter, hadn't seen anybody since the power went out, including his parents. I told him that was with me as well, and that I thought the entire thing was an emergency evacuation. He told me what I already knew. The storm hadn't moved in over a week. Hearing it from him, with the way he said it, I got chills. I know for a fact now Lori had come to a conclusion days ago that something unnatural is going on. I didn't say anything. By the end of the conversation, I was at his door, and I knocked. A minute went by, and I asked him if he had heard. He said he heard the knock over the walkie-talkie, but not at his door. He asked me if I was at the wrong house. I told him I wasn't, because I had been at his place at least 100 times in my life and had the address memorized by heart. I looked down at the welcome mat. I asked him to open the door anyway. I heard him getting up, walking to a door, which he opened. I could hear the wind on his end blowing through the foliage. He had shrubs beside his door. I looked down at my feet again and asked him to read his doormat. He sighed and said it read, "Welcome weary feet, working hands, empty stomachs, and loving hearts." I asked if he had that memorized. He told me he hadn't. His tone said that he understood, in that moment, that we were both being honest, that we both truly believed we were at the same doorstep, standing in one place, at one time. Lori said he had to eat and shower, but to stay in touch. The line went quiet. I shook the doorknob, which was locked. I spent the next 30-some minutes trying to get in without damaging anything. No luck. I spent the rest of the night talking to Lori, dumping my thoughts, telling him how I've been coping. He told me how he was tired. We agreed to keep our walkie-talkies on at all times, to keep our eyes on the batteries. We went to bed with a final agreement by morning to tell each other everything that happened from this point. 8:24. I woke up, ate, and searched for extra batteries. Today, Lori told me how he had been having nightmares of red flashes, something you would see with your eyes closed, or in a womb. I think that's how he put it. We tried to have a conversation. The mood was tense. We tried to talk about alt-rock bands, something we get along over pretty well. It didn't work. I told him to stop anything he might have been doing. Not much, I thought. Walk over and knock on my door. It sounded like he did just that. He went outside. I could hear the wind. Walked through grass, over pavement, up steps, and knocked on something. It wasn't my door. Naturally, I stuck my head outside. I looked left, right, at the neighboring houses. Didn't see Lori. I told him to stop bullshitting me. I was angry, something I regret as I'm typing this. He took the punches. I gave up over the door and, still pissy, decided for ourselves that we should try and meet up in the town square sometime. By then, I was too tired to walk that far and it was getting dark. I'm still too tired. I have Lori sitting on my nightstand while I'm typing. I've been talking calmer. I told him how I'm writing a memoir, typing it as we speak. He laughed when I told him how many pages I have down now. Lori said I was going to need a lot more if I wanted it to amount to something. I can quote him now, actually. He told me to, quote, write more than that, end quote. He sounded sad when he said that. He's been down lately, more quiet than he usually is. Lori just brought up a good point. We should try making smoke signals in the morning. I agreed. I'm going to bed. 8:26. Lori and I tried to meet up yesterday to reach the outside world, to reach anybody. We never found each other. What was originally supposed to be a productive day turned into a frustrated rampage between homes, stores, and buildings, trying to find a phone line, an emergency radio, anything that worked. I'm afraid. Even though I don't want to be alone anymore, I shut off Lori for the time being. I'm okay with admitting that I went to the nearest pack of cigarettes and started back on an old habit that had been dead for years. I'm okay with admitting that. I'm okay with admitting that today I stole my dad's Walkman and went on a walk in the hills, the wind threatening every light I tried to make. Tarzan boy on full volume. There's something about standing in the wind, watching the dark clouds tumble. My skin was tight with goosebumps. I was standing with nature's fury in all directions, being blocked by absolutely nothing, and for the first time in 11 days, I closed my eyes, I stretched out my arms, and I heard thunder. Lightning flashed and lit up the inside of my eyelids with red. Today, I'm okay with admitting I've gone through 3 packs of Camel Blues. Screw it if my parents read this someday. Screw it if they're still involved with my life someday. Today, I'm taking a break. I'm smoking in bed right now. I know it would drive them nuts. No, they would be mortified. I've had so many, I'm starting to imagine shapes out in my peripherals. So much for Lori and I being sober buddies. We agreed 2 years ago to the month we wouldn't touch a single cigarette or drop of alcohol again. That was after we got expelled from our community college for a major incident. 2 years sober can do a lot when you pick a habit back up. Last night I had a nightmare. I'll try my best to explain it. Some of the details are blurry, but I'm having a hard time shaking this one. I was in a room. I was in a lot of pain. I could see, but my vision was blurry. Disproportionately shaped men were standing over me. I was scared because as much as I could see them, I couldn't. They were complete silhouettes for everything but their eyes. Their eyes were so simple, they broke the illusion. The eyes were in focus, they weren't blurry, they were human, and the pupils were full black. The lights behind them hurt to look at, so my sight gravitated towards the eyes. They shifted around me until one of them pressed on my chest, and I woke up. I'm okay with admitting that when I'm that scared of something, I don't panic, I don't scream or cry, I just tear up and wait. I'm going to make amends with Lori tomorrow. 8:27. Lori didn't respond today. I ended up doing more or less the same of what I did yesterday. My high is wearing off. 8:28. Lori has something to tell me. I'll update when he's finished. Not sure if this is a careful revenge plot, but he sounded upset. He said he was walking and smoking out by the hills the past couple days, like I was. He was audibly shaken when he told me this. Very unlike him. Once we were on a hiking trip with his family and mine. 2 days in, he saw a mountain lion creeping up on our group from some brush. Proceeded to punch it square in the nose and watch it run away. Lori's not easily spooked. Lori said he had been walking through the hills on the 25th, right after I'd cut him off. The air had gotten really cold, then slightly warm before he saw it. He said that a lightning flash came from the general direction of where he was. Then there was thunder. He turned to look in the direction of the thunder and saw what looked like the dark silhouette of a rectangle, suspended in the air some distance away. Thinking it was a towel or a box caught in a power line, he walked closer. It didn't swing with the wind, and there wasn't a power line. He told me that after moving closer he had gotten the worst sense of dread he had ever felt in his life. A combined fear of closing danger and somebody watching him. There was a red-white flash from its direction, like a cell tower beacon, and it was gone. Lori can't seem to shake the thought of it. He's been getting really emotional. I knocked on his door again. I really wanted to console him. He said he couldn't hear the knocking, couldn't see me on the other side of the door. Then he broke down. I let him wane off. He was having a hard time processing. With his emotions, with our isolation, it sunk in. There's been something wrong all along. Laurie wasn't in town, but he believed he was. It was to the point where he was talking about the city layout as if he was there. He believed he was walking around downtown the other day, and it sounded like he was outside in the same condition I was. He hadn't been lying to me. I know that. He's being honest. I want to stay in touch with him, make sure he's doing okay. As much as I hate to admit it, he's going through a mental break. I'm going into Laurie's tomorrow. For all I know, he might be huddled up in some corner of his pantry having an episode. God bless Laurie. 8:29. Laurie isn't home. I radioed him asking where he was. 5 minutes later, he said he was in his bedroom. He was not in his bedroom from what I could see. I'd broken a window to get into his house and was standing in a doorway looking into his room. I walked around the house asking Laurie questions until I turned the walkie-talkie off on him. I ended up turning it back on later. I was frustrated, and it was stupid, but he isn't getting any better. I know for a fact my talking to him isn't going to help that. It hasn't really been the same since we left college. 8:30. Laurie rang me first today. He told me what I needed to hear. It was late in the afternoon, almost early evening. He sounds tired, and his speech is muffled, croaky, and shaky. I'm telling him to talk slowly. He's coughing some, like he's come down with something. I'm writing this as we speak because he's told me what happened already. I'm trying to convince me to tell him why he sounds so awful, but he won't elaborate. He is willing to tell me the main story again so I can type it in full in his own words. Before I start, I believe Laurie. Don't believe he's having a breakdown. I believe we're in danger, and have been this entire time. I think we've been isolated for a reason, and I think Laurie and I hadn't seen each other for a similar reason. I believe Laurie because, while walking today, I saw it too. I saw it hovering near the fallen oak tree on the hill. I'm taking this down in case anything happens to us. Here it is.
Sammy, are you typing?
Yes.
Can I start?
Anytime.
When you turned off the talkie on me yesterday.
Are you okay?
Just my cold.
I thought you said it wasn't a cold.
It is, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
After you hung the talkie up on me yesterday, I went into the living room. Since the day of the blackout, I noticed my CD player for the first time. Know which one?
The red one that runs on backup batteries?
Yeah.
Yep.
I got some batteries from the pantry. I don't think I've listened to music in over a week. Music. Sammy, I ended up getting lots of the disposable AA or AAAs. I don't remember. I put them in the radio just so the wind outside was picking up. I had a Cranberry CD in. It was on the final track from when I last listened to it. It was the Stars album. I think I rewinded a couple songs so I could enjoy it better when the last track came on. Stars is my favorite song of theirs. A little bit goes by and I remember the house starting to creak. The storm was really bad when it finally came in. Only 30 seconds in, I heard what sounded like an old-fashioned kitchen timer cranking. Then I smelled something like burnt rubber. I saw square shadows behind my living room windows. They were being lit up by this red light that kept getting brighter until the flashing started. My ears were ringing. My body was spazzing. I'm sure I was being electrocuted, and my mind was being drugged somehow. I couldn't think straight. The flashing between dark and light reds, strobing until I had to close my eyes. The light was coming from all directions, every window in the house. It was blinding. I know for a fact that the music was distorting and the CD was melting because the room felt oven hot. My ears rang worse until I couldn't hear, and my head got heavier until I blacked out. Right before I did, Sammy, I opened my eyes and saw the curtains had opened. They were watching me.
Who?
The thing that was floating in the hills that day. 3 of them. Sammy, I'm dying. They poisoned me. I'm swelling up. My ears are bleeding. My hair is...
9-1. I'm waiting for them now. I've seen their eyes in my sleep. They burn through my lids, turning from white to red. I saw it yesterday, so I think it's only fair that I see them the day after, just like Lori. Lori hasn't responded today. I've tried 911 at least 16 times. There's no signal, and there hasn't been since we got stuck in this warp. I know he's dying, he's rotting alive, and I can't do anything about it. I'll fight when they come. I'd like to think I have a will. 9-2. The swelling is only going to get worse, so I'm going to go ahead and get my thoughts down now. They came by yesterday. It was just as Lori said, except I saw their eyes. Their eyes were brighter than the lights, so much brighter. I couldn't make out every detail, but the things were dark and rectangular, and the lights were bright. Where I blacked out, it felt like the worst and most powerful nicotine high I had ever had in my life. The heat was unbearable, and the ringing put me out. I dropped like a fly, and I woke up to where I am now. I'm sitting in my bed, exhausted. My skin is swelling, my tongue, eyes, and other soft parts are fully swollen and throbbing. I've been patting my ears dry with some tissues that are piling up in my bed. I'm going to get some rest. 9-5. The swelling has gone down some. I'm still hacking blood and I'm still tired. I haven't bothered to look at myself in the mirror because when I look at my arms, all I see is a red and white fleshy rubber stretching over meatless bone. My hair is clumping and something my eye crusts over when I keep them closed for too long. The itching hasn't gone away. I haven't talked to Lori. I'm not sure if he had it as good as I did. I talk through the walkie-talkie at him every chance I get, even if I know he won't respond. I want him to know that God's with us. He loves us, and he won't let anything happen to us. Wherever they are, I want people to know. I see one every day hovering right by the old oak tree, moving back and forth slower than the naked eye can tell. It's almost always there. I keep my blinds shut and I don't go outside. I don't know what they are. They want me. They isolated us just for that purpose. The sky has been getting darker and darker. I see flashes of red light in the clouds when I get the nerve to look. My laptop screen has been blacking out pixel by pixel in random places. It's at 40-something charge. It has been for days now. I know that I'm dying. I can type better than I did when my fingers were sausages, and if I can get up enough strength in the next couple days, I'm going to leave the city. I'm going to go through the highway tunnel, and I'm going to get help. Help for me, and help for Lori, wherever he is. 9-7. This is my final entry before I leave. I'm so grateful to have written this. I know for many years writing is what I do when I was frustrated with life or with myself. This is different. It feels necessary. They were in the hills. I could see the tops of them, their eyes peeking over the horizon. They were watching me as I walked downtown to the entrance of the tunnel. The one that travels alone is floating by the mountain. It's facing me as I type this, as I'm sitting on a community bench that hasn't felt a human in weeks. I think it just said hi to me. I'm going to post this somewhere whenever I get the chance to. It might be tomorrow, it might be years from now. No matter what, I want the truth to be out there. My face is swelling again, and I know it's going to do what it did last time. It'll start with my head and move down to my torso and extremities until I can barely move at all. I have Bob in my backpack between some food and a first aid kit. He'll keep me company. I need to start walking. To begin with, my name is Samuel Terrence. I was a college dropout living a pretty sad life with my parents until a blackout that occurred in 2014. I recently posted a journal entry titled Blackout 8/15/14. That detailed a handful of weeks that would be the beginning of a bizarre string of events. Events that, even now, have a hard time coming to focus in my mind. In this forum, I'll do my best to remember any and all occurrences within the past 10 years. I can't make any promises, but I'll write what stuck out to me. To begin with, I have to be careful with what I talk about. I don't know why they didn't wipe my laptop's hard drive, so don't ask me. And if my memory is right, Dick Cheney is Satan incarnate. My last update was cryptic, a standalone post that gained a bit of traction. It's taken a few months since my quote-unquote reappearance to recall, reflect, and do some research placing into perspective what exactly I've been through, hence the wait. In 2014, I began to journal a bizarre experience I was having during a blackout. Somehow, after this blackout hit my hometown, I found myself completely alone. No people, animals, or outside connections. From what I remember and have recorded, almost everything living had disappeared without my knowing. A mean windstorm had hovered in the vicinity of my town for as long as I was experiencing this phenomenon. Looking back, I would have gone mad if it hadn't been for a walkie-talkie system that somehow broke through my isolation and put me in contact with my friend, Lori. I came to find he was experiencing the exact same thing as I was. After some time of talking, we both witnessed and came into close contact with a set of rectangular-shaped objects that made us both physically ill. I was somehow able to escape this situation. To answer an obvious question early on, Lori is still missing to this day. I haven't talked directly to his family as of the time I'm writing this, but I've been aiding in his search the best I can. On the flip side, the story of the blackout goes like this. On August 14th, 2014, a blackout hit my city. It was resolved within the next 4 days. Supposedly, crime rates rose due to the loss of power and turned into what authorities dubbed as a series of, quote, connected kidnappings, end quote. 5 other people besides Lori and I went missing between August 15th and 18th. Strange enough, law enforcement has stacks of files about sporadic and impossible burglaries occurring within this time frame. Some, according to reports, happened within the turn of a head and back. Other residents complained about sets of unmarked vehicles blocking roads, most of these roads leading into the hills surrounding the city. Said residents also reported seeing smoke rising from far behind these blocked roads. I'm the first and only missing person from this period to be accounted for, given 10 years later. I was found, according to my mother, on the outskirts of my town by a drainage pipe. I was in a comatose state. I pushed for more details, and she said I was also found clean, well-kept, with my old backpack, and wearing a set of clothes I would have worn any day as she last remembered. This was in September of 2024. My first solid memory in a long time was waking up in a hospital to a nurse tending to my vitals. There was a dried-out Play-Doh popsicle stick figurine on the window to my right, Bob. I was conscious again only 2 days after my retrieval. Come to find out, I had been reported missing for 10 years. My parents had divorced, and I was presumed dead after half a year of searching. Now, I'm in my early 30s. My mother was the first to rush by. She cried, a lot. My father came next, and he scolded me a little. It was so weird seeing them with a decade more of life than I had last seen them with. I greeted them as though I had just woken up from a long nap. The doctors were surprised, under the assumption I had been unconscious for so long that I had retained my speech and motor skills down to a T. After the world was assured that I was well enough to pick on, the questions came. First my parents, then the police, then whoever else was interested. What do you remember? My response was that I simply didn't know. This was a partial lie. After the questions came an embarrassing physical exam, something I'd imagined they would have done if I was unconscious anyway. They found slight traces of burn trauma covering most of my body, an array of heart problems only beginning with murmurs, and a small scar on the inner side of my right wrist, between the ulna and the radius. Something they had overlooked, as I feel it, is a small, round object, not unlike a BB pellet, lodged just beneath the scar. It freaks me out whenever I feel it, or worse, get the intrusive thought to move it around. I haven't mentioned it to anybody. There was nothing else beyond that. I was back and have been for a while now. I've been incorporating myself back into society little by little. I have a job at the local supermarket now, I have routine medical evaluations, and a strict diet and supplement set to follow. There was nothing else beyond that, until pretty early on, I started to remember, and reflect, and research. Some people, when they remember something traumatic, tend to relapse or panic. I didn't panic, but I couldn't sit still. I reread my quote-unquote journal at some point, and along that line I touched it up and shared it. Only then was I able to find out the truth of what really started all those years ago. Before I share what I've pieced together, I wanted to preface my experience with an account that I stumbled across in my research. This, I hope, adds much needed context to what I've come to remember. The first sighting was on Easter Sunday of 1971. It began with the family of a man named J.E. Wilson. According to the online report I read, it was approximately mid-afternoon, and the family, mother, young son, young daughter, grandparents, nieces, nephews, and other extended family, had begun their yearly Easter traditions. After an hour of grilling, the family went about to set up their annual egg hunt. The daughter, along with one of the nieces, had seen it first. The two were lingering by the edge of the backyard near a tree line when the daughter screamed. J.E. Wilson and his brother-in-law ran over immediately and pulled the children away, suspecting a coyote problem that the Wilsons had been dealing with for some time. J.E. was confused when he saw a pair of red lights under the dark of the canopy. His daughter, brother-in-law, and niece retreated as the object came into focus, gliding towards J.E. He described it as a dark rectangular prism, black and shiny like, quote, used motor oil, end quote, roughly 10 feet tall. It had two red eyes, J.E. described them as looking more like tail lights, that grew brighter in intensity as it approached. The objects hovered 3 to 4 feet above the ground and seemingly, quote, warmed the air, end quote, around it. When it was less than 10 feet away from J.E., it stopped moving and focused the lights from its, quote-unquote, eyes onto him. When it had finished doing that, Wilson said it emitted a brilliant, quick flash of light that resulted in intense heat and a sound that he compared to a flashbulb. The brush in the general vicinity proceeded to burst into flames. J.E. recalled he was in too much pain to notice the object retreat. The family filled this gap in his statement, stating that the object disappeared just as slowly as J.E. said it had approached. Police were called and a small investigation took place. Nothing definitive was found besides burnt brush on the forest edge, according to a police officer I talked to, an older man and friend of my father who's worked as a deputy at the time. The Wilsons had moved out of town shortly after this encounter, no explanation given. This report was in an online forum. It disappeared a day after I print-screened the full text, not the report, but the whole forum site. If J.E. Wilson was still alive, I hope to contact him someday. If this is seen through, my communication with him will hopefully be recorded in my next post. I firmly believe that my written encounters in 2014 were with something consistent in both Wilson's sighting and what I would come to remember after I wrote my journal. With this out of the way, here's my account starting on September 7th, 2014. This was when I had stopped typing. The following is imperfect and based solely on my memory. Whether these memories were dreams, visions, or something else, that is for the reader to decide. I hold steadfast that my experience, as much as it is hard to admit, was very real and agrees with the beyond. After finishing the last bit of my journal, I closed my laptop and went down the tunnel leading out of town. This was, in my mind, at the time, the only option I had to escape whatever anomaly I was experiencing. I had a flashlight that ran on batteries the width of my thumb, and I used it indiscriminately for whatever light it actually gave. I was walking for a long time. I don't remember being afraid of the dark ahead, but the growing darkness behind me. I kept looking back towards the beginning of the tunnel to see if one of those god-awful things was following me. I never saw anything. I was at least an hour on foot to the other side of the tunnel, a travel I had taken for granted by car. I was upset when I saw that the other side was just as unoccupied as the city was. The tunnel drops off at a rural set of running hills. This should have been expected. The sky was much, much darker, still daytime, and the wind was strong enough to push my balance. All of my surroundings were way too saturated with color, leading me to think something was wrong with my eyes. I turned to my right, and there was something large and dark hovering at least 10 feet above the ground, close to me. Whatever this thing was, it looked like one of the rectangles, way elongated and with a cube sitting on its top. The cube had 2 lights on 2 of its faces versus 2 lights on one of its faces. I didn't get too good of a look beyond that. It wasn't there 1 second, then the next, it was. My My vision tunneled either out of fear or the will of the object observing me. Then I blacked out. I woke up on a cold table in a monochrome dimly lit room. Everything was dull metal like a dark stainless steel. There's an ambient vibrance that filled the area. This might have been an industrial fan. Behind this, I could hear feet shuffling around me. My vision was painfully nearsighted when I had woken up, and didn't get any better as I tried to bring things into focus. From what I could garner, there were 3 people surrounding me. All 3 appeared, from my vantage point, as complete silhouettes. One of them reached out and dangled something in front of my face. This was Dad's Walkman. The voice that asked me, "What is this?" wasn't spoken aloud. It was ringing in my head, and the tone sounded indifferent. It took a moment for me to concentrate on what I was saying. I couldn't tell you why, but I screamed like hell when I saw the speaker's hand holding the Walkman with long, spindly fingers. The skin was pale and there wasn't any fingernails. Starting at the wrist and going beyond was a form-fitting black sleeve. This hand was not normal. When I screamed, my head was jerked back to the table and my jaw spasmed shut. I couldn't make much noise after that. I saw them take a tape from somewhere, probably my book bag, and try their best to put it in the Walkman. They did this as a show for me. They made sure it was right in my sights. The song choice alone made me want to thrash around more than I already was. Only the good die young. The one that had spoken to me watched with dark bug eyes as I jerked my head around. My neck was the only part of my body that I could move. The memory quit sometime after the song started. Next, I remember waking up on another table. I knew this wasn't the same room because the wall to my right was gone. There was a tall hallway going out from this missing wall as far as I could see. It looked like the back room of a grocery store, stripped of its pallet racks. My vision was normal again, and I could move my body. Naturally, I got up and walked. The rooms I'd woken up in, including the first one, were much more sleek and clean over the rest of the compound. The facilities were clean, but I distinctly remember these 2 rooms being much more pristine. I don't remember many details about the actual hallways, other than the dark gray blandness and how high the ceiling was. Sometimes the ceiling would duck, stay that way for a while, then find its way back up. There were occasionally doors. There was even one close to the room I had woken up in. All of them were locked and reinforced, and nothing budged. It didn't take long for me to get extremely bored with this. Over the course of my stroll, I never got tired, hungry, or thirsty. I must have been walking for at least a month. I didn't see anybody or anything. A month in was when I decided to turn back and find the room I had woken up in. I decided the only way I was going to find any peace was if I could lie on that table again and close my eyes. It was less than a month back, not even a week. I knew some shortcuts at that point. When I got to the expanse where I could finally see the open wall, I noticed that the door closest to where I had woken up was open. The metal bars holding it shut were retracted, and the door was resting on the adjacent wall. Inside was a clean, large storage room with no extensions, only fluorescent lights in the high ceiling. On the center floor was a tall rectangular prism. I stopped myself for a moment when I realized what I was looking at. There it was, in a room with a doorway too small for it to leave. Its eyes were dark, and it looked deactivated. To that, I simply blacked out, shut the door over the best I could, and laid down on the table I found myself on in the beginning. It was oddly comfortable, and I fell asleep instantly. Next, I remember a handful of visions. They're all disconnected, and may have been years apart. I don't remember what led up to them, or what happened after them. Whatever stuck out in my mind, I'm writing down. First, I walked up to a door and looked into a room. I did not have any motor control. I had a feeling that all of these movements were pre-programmed. This room was pristine, like the previous 2 I mentioned. In this room were 3 or 4, probably 4 figures. They were tall and thin, all holding what looked like skinny sledgehammers with both of their hands. They were raising the hammers above their heads and bringing them down to a shattered object on the ground. I recognized a strap from Dad's Walkman. They were moving fast, and all of their movements were blurry. One of them phased up to me. It didn't walk or run, it just floated towards me, really, really fast. I got a good look at its face. Its head was shaped like an upside-down teardrop, and it had large, slanted eyes, pale skin, slightly bluish, no ears or hair, and a small mouth and nose. It bared these sharp little teeth at me. Its head turned slowly as it spoke right into my head. Blasphemy. Then it zipped back to the circle and began working with its sledgehammer again. The next three visions are interchangeable. I've not been able to pin a timeline on them. This one I'm almost sure was a dream. It began in a dark place. It was cold, but I could hear summertime bugs. I could only see about 10 feet out in front of me whichever way I looked. There were lampposts, but they and their light were only visible when I got right up to them. I remember hearing something large rummaging in the dark. It wasn't running or walking heavy. It was rummaging, and it knew I was there. It could see me walking around, but I couldn't see it. I remember panicking at some point and running to a bench. I laid down and thought I could play dead, so I closed my eyes and waited. I knew exactly what it was going to do when it walked up to me. I could feel it pressing down on my chest with massive hands. I squinted my eyes just enough so I could see what it was. It had thick arms with white fur that extended into the dark above me. Beyond that, I could see a pair of little glowing eyes. They were orange and had black pupils that might as well have been the rest of the darkness. I closed my eyes again as it let out an airy growl. This one might have been a dream. I was in another room. This one was way too bright. A person, this thing was for sure a person, slid something to me on a table. I picked it up and said something along the lines of, "What is this?" My question wasn't answered, and I don't remember what exactly the object looked like. It was box-shaped, from what I remember. When it went to set the object down, it stuck to my fingers. When I complained, it vibrated like a tick gum pack you might get at a novelty store. I yelled, as it wouldn't come off my fingers and the vibration was uncomfortable. The more I yelled, the more it buzzed me, so I stopped yelling. The man, I'm sure it was a man, leaned forward. He was wearing a surgeon's mask, black suit, and face-fitting sunglasses. The mask was moving up and down, and he was laughing. I said, "What's up with you?" He stopped laughing and reached forward. He had on blue medical gloves that were too small. He pulled a little object off of my fingers, set it back down on the table, and stared at me too long for comfort. Then he started laughing again. This one wasn't a quote-unquote dream in the sense that the others quote-unquote were. Here, I was looking down at a gap between one of the reinforced doors in the concrete floor. There was something wiggling freakishly from underneath it. The movements almost felt playful. It was, as far as I could tell, a set of long, pale fingers. These did not scare me as the others did. These felt different. They disappeared after a second of wiggling, then they reappeared, sliding something under the door. It was a slip of paper, and I reached for it. Just as I got close to catching it, the fingers in the paper slipped back under the door. They reappeared a second later. This time, the paper had writing. I reached for it, and it slipped back in. The next time I was prepared. I had my hand hovering over the spot where the hand would appear. In the split second before I smacked my hand down, I saw the paper had different writing. The moment my hand touched its hand, I knew the truth without even reading the paper. I laughed a little to myself and let go as it slunk back under. This one was my friend. I smile, thinking about it now, and all of the uncertainty and emptiness I felt in that state. Something for the first time since Lori interacted with me. Not talked to me, not looked at me, or used me, but interacted with me. This jumped to another disconnected memory too vague for me to describe in detail. This one was in a dark room and it felt like a vision test with patterns of light instead of a letter pyramid. I don't remember my surroundings or what the patterns were, but I do remember a large machine being pressed against my face, like a vision test. My next solid memory started in a low-ceiling hallway, not dissimilar to the ones I found myself wandering around in towards the beginning of my experience. I had the perspective of standing and watching a conversation unfold. I couldn't see my body below me. Off in the distance, standing next to a more or less ordinary door, were two figures. One was a man, and the other was a very, very short person. The man was in a suit and had round glasses on. This wasn't the man who was wearing the surgical mask as I remembered before. The short figure was bizarre looking. He or it had a large bald, from what I could tell, head, and was wearing black coveralls paired with a matching military cap. He had long, pale fingers and was looking up at the suited man with his hands crossed behind his back. The suited man was expressing something accusatory at him. I felt an intense hatred for the suited man. Every kind of negative energy I could think of was coming off of him in waves, yet his outward appearance was composed. I stood for a while, watching, and then decided to walk up to them. They didn't seem to notice, and odd enough, I didn't even hear my own footsteps. I might as well have been invisible. When I approached them, the energy got to be overwhelming. The feeling almost drowned out my understanding that the person I was looking at was former Vice President Dick Cheney, and that the shorter figure was not a person at all. I knew this as a fact then, and I know it now. The short being looked at me with eyes that were large and sharp with scrutiny. Cheney didn't seem to register me until my energy began to bubble over, and I could feel my body emanating heat. I was damn close to them. He turned to me, still talking to the being, and said something like, "This is what I'm talking about. We can't have them floating around like this. They will hear and remember." The shorter being stayed quiet. From this moment, I took away that Cheney was behind most, if not all of this. It was a very strong notion. I hated it. I retreated back from the conversation and lost consciousness when the short being lifted his hand towards me. Then, there were people in surgical masks around me. I could feel that a point in the center of my forehead was open. It didn't hurt, but I could feel pressure. They were working with needles. Cheney was standing to my right, looking content, but not smiling. I hated that man like hell. I was getting a download to my brain that kept telling me it's him. It's his fault. I didn't have enough energy to put up with the surgeons or him, so I just lolled off. When I woke up next, something did hurt. My right wrist, lower back, and both of my knees. Nothing from my forehead. I was standing up in the center of a small, dark room lit by an orangey, incandescent light bulb. This was the first time I registered my age. I've always been thin. Here I was more filled out. Not padded, but healthy. I knew I wasn't old, but rather older. I was well groomed. My hair had been shaved, nails clipped, and on my face, I could feel stubble. I was used to it being patchy. For once, I wasn't wearing a windbreaker and jeans. I was in a hospital gown. My skin, once irritated and patchy with sores, looked long-healed. I was standing there looking at this ratty door. There's not a handle on the inside, but there was a sliding cover at eye level, like you would see in a prison. Just as I'm thinking of this sliding cover, it opens, and I run up to it. There was somebody looking through it. Their eyes were dark and large.
"You're awake.
Am?
I have your stuff."
Thank you. It didn't have to, but at this point the person raised their head and positioned their mouth over the opening.
"You're welcome."
It had a small mouth and sharp teeth. It was one of the teardrop people. It noticed that I noticed what it was.
"Please don't be scared."
But I am.
"Don't. I'm going to open the door, but you better not run."
Is that a threat?
"We'll see."
It opened the door and stood in front of me, full-figured. It blurred itself so I didn't have to look at it directly. The only features I could see clearly were its eyes. It proceeded to glide down the hallway to my right, and I followed it. I wasn't scared then. It was tall, but it was also gangly. If it tried anything, I could probably help myself. Who are you?
"I'm Jerry."
Jerry? You have a name?
"Might as well. You just thought of that name. It wasn't my idea."
What's your real name?
"Just follow me."
JFM?
"Sure.
Jerry Fitzgerald Martin.
Sure. I like that."
I kept following Jerry down the hallway until he opened a door on our left and went in. This room was bright in lighting and color. As far as I could tell, it was a locker room. He floated over to and opened a locker. Jerry took my book bag and a set of folded clothes out.
"They're clean."
Thank you. He handed the clothes to me and set the book bag down on a bench. You're wearing coveralls?
"Yes.
What are you?
As much of you as anybody else."
Are you a ghost?
Not quite.
You're not human, are you?
Not in the way you think of it, no.
An angel?
Not really.
Jerry paused and reached behind his back. He pulled my laptop out of thin air and put it into my book bag, tapping it with his forefinger.
You'll need this, trust me.
I will.
You will.
I put my clothes on as Jerry picked up my book bag and held it. When I was dressed, I put my arms out scarecrow style as he put the book bag over my shoulders. He took an extra moment to adjust Bob, who had been zipped halfway into my book bag the entire time we had been down there. Jerry glided to my front and looked at me dead on. His image stopped blurring. This confirmed the observation I had made earlier. Jerry was one of the beings I had seen over the course of my experience. He was not of this world.
They're going to want to silence you. The information you have written in your laptop is valuable beyond anything else you know. Guard it with your life. You'll piece the rest together when it's time for you to do so.
Why are you doing this for me?
What they've done is wrong.
I understand.
I know you do. Take my hand.
When I did, a staircase appeared in front of us and we began to walk up.
Stay in touch.
When I woke up at the hospital, I had amnesia. I knew what my parents were telling me, and I vaguely remembered the blackout of 2014. I did not remember anything in between. Weeks into the recovery, they started to come in flashes, always when I was alone. Each flash would accumulate to one memory for every 3 days. I wrote them down. They meant something, whether a symbolic representation of a fight for consciousness or actual happenings. It wasn't as hard to grapple with emotionally as I thought it would be. It was just hard to believe. I might talk to a psychologist someday or get some kind of affirmation. It depends on how things progress. Right now, though, I feel at an odd peace. As much as everything that started on 8/15/2014 is unexplainable to me, my personal connections, law enforcement, medical experts, and beyond, I'm confident in saying that I've experienced, firsthand, a series of high strangeness events. These have ranged from close encounters of the first, second, third, and fourth kind to out-of-body experiences. I know that, as much as I would like to call the passages you've just read memories or visions, I can't deny the evidence anymore. My wrists, my skin, my health, my journal, the vagueness and vividness that I remember everything in. But something else. When I was rummaging through my backpack for the first time since I had left the hospital, I noticed a small envelope taped to the back of my laptop. The outside said, "Sorry for the Walkman." Inside there was a slip of paper, roughly the same size and shape of a dollar bill. Paired with a crudely drawn design was a single word in crayon: Space Bucks. In the recent months since my dramatic reappearance into the waking world, I found out more about myself than at any other point in my life. My name is Samuel Terrence. I'm the author of 2 internet posts, one made in January and one made in March, both detailing a high strangeness event that took a 10-year chunk out of my life. To reiterate, up until 2014, I was living with my parents. I was a blockhead, in every sense of the word, jobless and on the verge of being homeless. I had been expelled from a local college some years before, and my friend, my only friend, Lori, was along with me for the ride. We were the kind of bums you would expect to see in a mall parking lot at 3 in the morning, smoking weed and staring at the stars. Except we didn't smoke weed, or drink, or do anything. This was the only thing we had cleaned up in our lives. Everything else was far from decent. Life continued like this until, on the afternoon of August 15, 2014, I was sitting on my back patio and reading a book when the power went out. I didn't pay any mind to it at first. Our neighbor's power grid wasn't the best, and storms came frequent at that time of year. Days went by to reveal no signs of life. Clouds had formed overhead that were heavy, dark, swirling. The sky played this tape day in and out, the storm never making any progression. And then Lori happened. I heard him on our family's emergency walkie-talkie within the first couple of days. Turns out he was experiencing the same thing I was. He was isolated and deeply afraid. Over time, we came to imply that we were trapped in between worlds. Neither of us could see each other physically, and the talkies proved to be our only means of contact. They were an impossible bridge across whatever nonsense we had been pulled into. Lori and I began to see things. First Lori, then me. We witnessed apparent rectangular objects hovering and disappearing in flashes of light. After days of staying at a distance, they confronted Lori first, making him extremely sick. Then they confronted me. These objects, which over time I've come to dub affectionately as qubits, had a massive dark presence and what I believe was designed to look like a pair of glowing red eyes. They were also, as it turns out, highly radioactive. I suffered for a long period because of this, and throughout I never heard from Lori after his own sickness took full hold. I recorded every ounce of this at the time of its happening, August 16th and on. With a laptop, and although amateur, it helped jog my memory after everything had come to pass. I left town through a highway tunnel on September 7th, 2014, in desperate hopes of finding an escape, when I was captured by a strange design of qubit and taken elsewhere. This elsewhere was the interior of a sprawling compound. Much of what I remember from this time is taken out of a mishmash combination of solid and speculative memory. Some memories were clear and others were dull. What I do remember, however, are a series of distinct recollections where I interacted with a series of pale, tall beings that I began to refer to as teardrop people, due to the unusual shape of their heads. I also saw what I believed to be former Vice President Dick Cheney involved with this mysterious program that had me captive. Through brief research, his presence alone is noteworthy in the context of recent congressional hearings. At some point in this 10-year period, I find it impossible that what I remembered is the entirety of what occurred over that time span. One of these beings intervened, returned my personal belongings, and sent me back home. I awoke in a hospital with amnesia, acclimated back into my life, and remembered, which leaves me where I am now. Without further ado, here are some crucial updates. Lori is dead. He was found in critical condition on May 1st, 2025, by a drainage site similar to where I was found. According to hearsay, he was tainted heavily by various drugs, of what variety I am not sure. For a fact, his forehead had a small opening to the brain in its center, and his ribcage had been opened and butterflied out. By the time Lori was recovered, he was already giving way to severe infection. I mean, his bare organs, his brain, were exposed to gray water. The news was a game of telephone. It came from an unknown discovery, to a police dispatch, to Lori's parents, to my parents, then me. I don't have the emotional energy to describe what it took or how it felt to get Lori's bedside, but when I did, I saw clouded eyes form into what was to the moon and back, sharper than the eyes of the beings I encountered over my tenure to them. I physically saw a cloud of bacteria and decay shift away from his pupils, irises, and whites. He looked nothing like the friend I knew. Lori clasped a cold hand to mine and said, "I can see the stars, Emmy." Then I was taken away by a security team. Lori had no doubt been through an experience similar to mine. I don't know what he meant by what he said, and I do not want to know. That is all. I got into contact with J.E. Wilson through a backdoor source. I was allowed to interview him, however, he did not want to be recorded, so I took notes. I met with him on May 23rd. As it turns out, Mr. Wilson is a Vietnam veteran and retired Navy admiral. He lives a few states away, and he's much, much older now. Mr. Wilson is in his 90s, looking at most 70. To this, I commented on how vibrant he looked. He told me that it wasn't without a fight. After multiple failed bypasses, he had received a full heart transplant as soon as something like that was available. I asked Mr. Wilson to elaborate, and he explained that doctors told him it was likely to do with high exposure to electromagnetic energy. Mr. Wilson then told me the full story of his initial encounter at my request. Every detail matched almost perfectly to the original forum post I had found and detailed in my previous entry. Easter Sunday, a large anomalous object approaches from some forest bush and flashbangs Mr. Wilson, except, during the encounter, on top of the heat and the other properties exhibited by the qubit, he told me that the brush and various other foliage around it was sparking, that the air felt and smelled electric to him. His hair stood on end. When Mr. Wilson put his hand on his heart, he said he got heartburn at that moment. His hand sparked on his shirt. He told me he believes that this is what was happening individually with the plants around him. Mr. Wilson maintains that the encounter with the cubit left him with the heart problems he came to face later in life. He seemed curious when I called the object a cubit. It slipped, really. I asked him if he had his own nickname for it. He did, telling me his family called it a BB, short for building block. We laughed about that. Naturally, I asked Mr. Wilson if he had any further encounters since. Enthusiastically, a little too, he shook his head and yelled, "Yes." I asked him, "With the cubits?" "No." "With what?" He squinted and leaned forward in his chair, eyes glinting, pointing at nothing. "The blue meanies," Mr. Wilson said. He leaned back, satisfied. I asked him what he meant by blue meanies, and he went off. The blue meanies were tall figures that would stand outside of his bedroom window at night. Only he would see them, as his wife was always asleep on the other side of the bed from him during the confrontations. Mr. Wilson described them as extremely pale, unnaturally thin and tall, with bluely tinted skin, almost all with dark eyes. "They came into the house only once." "Really?" "Yes, and they talked to me." "What did they say?" "Sammy, they looked down at me right in the eyes and said, 'We own you.'" Wow, was all that I could think. I was sitting there with a high-ranking Navy official, and he was dead serious. The persistent sightings of these beings was eventually what pushed him and his family out of town and states away. We talked further, going down rabbit holes about his service, completely unrelated. Towards the end of our conversation, I felt I owed Mr. Wilson some answers, so I gave him a brief overview of what the second half of my account entailed. Before our meeting, he had known about me seeing a cubit, and this was about it. He turned very pale and led me out of his house. It wasn't rude, but it was abrupt. He told me we would talk later. I thanked him as Mr. Wilson, to which he said, "Call me Jerry." As of yet, I haven't heard back from him. My discussion with Jerry E. Wilson clicked broader details of my experience into place. It was incredibly eerie hearing from him exactly what I needed to hear. Even with this, I wasn't prepared for what would come next. On June 3rd, I received an unmarked letter from a person claiming to be a military police officer. This individual, whose name I've withheld, is beyond credible with the information I found on them. For lack of better description on my part, here's a direct transcript of the letter received. Dear Mr. Terrence, I've been keeping in touch with your story since the publishing of your initial account earlier this year. I think it's fair that you, along with your investigation, are privy to the real truth of the matter. On August 15th, 2014, our corpse was rushed to hometown in order to enact a blockade for an area including the highland terrain straight east of said city. I was in one of the units stationed closest to the incident, in a plateau roughly 2 miles east of your neighborhood's access road to this terrain. I, and many other men guarding the site, bore witness to a downed non-human craft. This craft was jet black, flawless in its structure, and dreidel-shaped. Its surfaces were highly angular, and from its top it released a noxious gas and beaconed an intense, flashing red light. The object is what caused the blackout on that day in 2014. It is better to be killed than you and others affected not to have closure. Close intel sources I am in personal contact with tell me of a rogue criminal operation performing psychological experiments on subjects of interest. This I know for a fact. You are separated from this world in such a way that they were testing your performance regarding psionic potential. The beings you encountered were involved or engineered non-human entities. Please be very, very careful. Redacted. This letter speaks for itself, so I'm left with these. The memory of a friend, the story of an old man, a warning from the inside. I've seen what damage they can do. I've learned that I'm living a truth, and I've received greater things to consider and ponder. Through this extraordinary journey, I've grown into my own. If my punkish former self could see what I've become now, he would find little in common with the fast-developing, sharp-thinking mind coming to be so powerful out of a state that should have ended with nothing but the worst for his mind and heart. I'm at an odd peace with Lori, with my experience, with the beings. I'm writing this in the view of two things: a dried Play-Doh and popsicle stick figurine sitting on my nightstand, and a poorly drawn imitation of a dollar bill framed above my desk. both to remind me of this. I've been humiliated by people, uplifted by people for telling my story. I've been in and out of hope. I've thought and thought about all that one could think about when faced with something like this. And through it all, I've held one thing true. If God created us in His image, so did He with them. This will be my last post before I compile our experience into a book. Best, St. In Memoriam, Lawrence Taylor, 1992 to 2025. And that is the full trilogy of the Blackout series. I went ahead and compiled all 3 parts into this final part with this third piece added to the end because it was kind of short, and I said that I don't want to make too many short ones because I've gave you like 3 short ones in a row. So this one's going to be 40, it should be 50 minutes long. If I'm lucky, it'll hit the hour mark. But yeah, this is the entirety of the story. In this last part here, you'll notice there probably wasn't any dialogue effects, and that's because it is in writing. In the story, he said that they were notes, and they were taken down, and he described them as writing, so I didn't really want to do the dialogue because it is actually, theoretically, I shouldn't have even done the voices, but I decided to at least do the voices. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this series. It was definitely very esoteric, very interesting, very well written. The author sent me this because it seems like the Creepypasta website has not been fast in getting back about posting this third part, so I'm really happy that he sent it to me to share it with you here, and I hope you all enjoyed this series. If he writes anything in the future, maybe I'll be lucky enough to narrate it, but yeah, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for hitting all the buttons below. I will see you in the next Ego Volt Anima Vestra.